Dokkan Battle has thousands of units that are designed to be appealing. So what causes a card to be hated by the community? Well, in this video I'm going to go over some of the most despised cards in the game and explain why they are hated by the majority of the community. I have combed through the wikis and the reddits to get a true taste of what the community thinks of these units. And stay tuned till the end because I can guarantee there's going to be some cards here you either haven't seen or forgot about. Also, please subscribe and like the video. I'm genuinely going broke. Now let's get straight into the thick of it. The first card we have to talk about is Full Strength Goku. This card is very rare, but even if you still get him, no one wants him. This STR Goku was released in 2015 as a V-Jump event reward and has been clowned on ever since. He's a free SR unit, so obviously he was never going to be one of the best units in the game. His passive skill is literally just a rare chance at 50% attack, but that's not where the hatred of this card comes from. If you've been watching this video, you can easily tell that this card's art is quite ugly to say the least. And the fact that this card came out when the Dragonball Super art style was new and quite controversial, it did not help its case. People still visit the Dokkan wiki just to hate on this card, saying things like, quite faithful to Dragon Ball Super, even faithfully reproduced the horrendous art, and who the F made this art? Whoever made this art needs to be vaporized. I personally have nothing against Super's art style, but I can see why people think this one example is especially bad, and I think it has something to do with the wonky eyes. Moving on to some more known cards, let's talk about Team Bardock, and no, not the free-to-play Team Bardock, I'm talking about the Great Ape units. Sure, the Great Ape ability is cool and makes you invincible, but these cards are seriously useless nowadays, and yet they find their way into every GSSR pool on every banner. These guys are a genuine waste of space. They can't be fed into anyone useful, they aren't useful, and they are the biggest letdown when you see them in your multi-summons. Imagine grinding 50 stones for a chance at the new LR, and you get a crappy animation, but you still hold out hope all the way to the end of the summon just to see Shugesh or Tora. At the least of leasts, Vegeta and Bardock can be used as super attack fuel for other cards, but the rest of these guys just suck. So when I say they are some of the most hated units in the game, I feel like a lot of you will agree with me. Next up is a card you all know well, and that is my boy, Super Trunks. We waited all year for a good Trunks, and this guy is all we got. Not only was he super average, they gave him a ridiculous transformation condition and didn't add enough to his kit to justify needing 5 attacks to transform. If they had just made it 4 attacks, it would have only been 2 turns bare minimum for his transformation mechanic. You might say, oh well, why not give him additionals in the dupe system to supplement the lack of additional attack in his kit? Well, it turns out dodge is almost necessary if you want to use this unit in endgame content, because the only way for him to get guard pre-transformation is having 3 Android/Cell Saga allies. But wait, let's read his passive again. Ki +2 in attack and defense plus 150%, plus an additional attack and defense plus 100%, that's fine. Launches an additional attack that has a great chance of becoming a super attack and a high chance of guarding all attacks. So essentially, you're telling me that you have to run this trash team to have a 50% chance to guard with Trunks. I honestly have no idea what they were thinking when they made this card. It was so sad to see how they ruined one of my favorite characters. Following that disaster, we've got a card everyone expected on this list, and it's the Vegito Blue Frauds. I don't think I've ever seen a unit lose hype post-release faster than VB. This card almost managed to slip under the radar and act like a good unit, but luckily we had the truth shouting out the truth to the people. The more you use these two, the more their flaws became visible. These two are very clearly a slot 1 unit by design. Having a 50% bonus against only Realm of God's enemies isn't the worst condition ever. After all, this card came out during the Dismal Future Red Zone. But the problem is, even with this buff, this unit still gets slapped by the event it was designed for. It takes 5 turns to get Vegito out with 70% or less HP on turn 5, and 7 turns if you're above 70% HP. The reason this is terrible is because first of all, the Zamasu fight wasn't long enough to capitalize on VB's transformation, and second of all, it was a struggle to get there simply because this card has no damage reduction and builds defense too slowly to make up for it. For a card that yells "We Saiyans have no limits," this unit sure has a lot of limits. The community quickly started turning this card into a meme with pictures of KO screens all across Reddit, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. I really hope they learn their lesson with this unit once it eventually gets its Easy A, because this was one of the most hyped units in the game's history and became hated for being a complete letdown. Meanwhile, Zamasu is considered usable even by today's standards. Now, let's talk about some lesser known cards you may have forgotten about. First off, we've got Int Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Vegeta from the Resurrection F movie. This is a 2-sentence passive skill TUR that came out in late 2022. They offered basically nothing, and you might say that since it was only 2022, cards were not that strong yet. But then you look at the Gambas who came out before these two on Global, and you'll realize why this unit was hated. It took a great moment and made it completely forgettable and unusable. Hey, at least Vegeta had Rainbow Orb changing if you could wait the 4 turns to actually get him out. There is hope though, since 2025 is the year this unit should be getting an easy A. Anyways, following another fraud blue duo, we've got the GOAT Physical LR Cooler. What can I say that hasn't been said before? This guy is the definition of below average. He wasn't even in the top 10 best LRs when he came out. The only good thing about him was his revive skill, which can be used right away. He's incredibly weak and slow to build up, which made him really useless in endgame content. The revive skill was essentially worthless since he dies right away most of the time. Cooler is a character everyone loves to see in Dokkan, but this card was so bad everyone hated it. And the fact that they put him in every carnival banner as a filler unit did not help. Imagine summoning for Vegeta and getting a guaranteed featured animation just to pull this Cooler. You might as well have gone an SR since you can't use this card for anything besides story mode and Dokkan events. Hopefully we don't ever have to deal with this type of unit again, because this was super disappointing. Physical Radits. What more do I need to say? This guy was the biggest joke of the year, a late 2022 unit that made absolutely no sense. Tons of random conditions that did not do enough to make this card good. You get a small buff if he's only facing one enemy, but if he's facing 2 or more enemies, he gets a big defensive buff. And if he lands a finishing blow, you get a massive reward of 2 ki on a TUR that's almost always gonna have 12 ki anyways. This guy was clowned for doing bradillions of damage, which just means he didn't do too much damage. The best thing about Raditz is that his super attack was an AoE, so at least he's useful for world tournament grinding, but the existence of Int Piccolo put this guy to shame even in that. The next few cards I'm going to mention weren't entirely hated, but certain mechanics ruined these cards' potential and caused people to be frustrated with them. For example, AGL Teen Gohan. This guy had so much potential and was a great LR on paper, but to get him to SSJ2 you needed to be below 58% HP and have an Android 16 card on the team to transform. You could also transform him after turn 5 with below 58% HP and any Android card on the team. This was a terrible drawback at the time because the game didn't have that many categories and Gohan was supposed to be your leader, but his leader's skill was for Kamehameha, meaning your only option for an Android with that category would be Perfect Cell. Nowadays it wouldn't be so bad, but when this card came out, link skills were integral to a card's full potential, and Cell does not link well with a bunch of Gokus and Gohans. So you go through all these problems just to have to wait 5 turns for Gohan to transform and do more damage. When the Easy 8 came out, it was a lot easier to use this card and its transformation, with way more considerable options for androids, leaders, and even Android 16 cards. But on release, this transformation requirement was super hated on, and for good reason. STR Jiren is a TUR that dominated on release with a very useful built-in stun. This card was great during a period where Dokkan events were considered endgame content. But nowadays, stunning and sealing event bosses are not an option anymore. Meaning, to make Jiren an impactful Easy Aid, they would have to give him a major boost in other categories. Instead, they made the most useful upgrade in his kit being damage reduction, conditional to the fact that there were 2 or more enemies. This instantly ruined the unit since most endgame content is one boss. And to get his additional 111 boost to attack and defense, he needed a tournament participants or universe survival saga enemy. The condition I just mentioned isn't nearly as bad as the first one, but why so many conditions for an already underpowered unit whose Easy A came out in late 2023? Int Broly and Rose also get the same treatments when it comes to Easy A's. Int Broly is not that bad, but suffers heavily on defense with not enough damage reduction, which made people instantly turn their backs on it. Meanwhile, Rose's Easy A was released in the middle of a defensive meta and given no guard and no damage reduction. At least he had the ability to greatly stack defense for every super attack with built-in additionals, but it just wasn't enough and left everyone dissatisfied. The good news is that with some of the newer blue zones in 2024, he was able to make a slight comeback since he was actually given time to stack up before the bosses started hitting for over 1 million damage. Definitely not usable by today's standards, but at least he had his redemption, unlike many others on this list who just got thrown to the side and made fun of right away. Speaking of thrown away and useless, let's talk about Super 17, the only banner that no one was even tempted to summon on. This card exists for no reason. He never got the support he needed to be usable, and now even if he got the support he needs, he wouldn't be good enough to run. This card has a terrible design and was completely screwed over. No one was excited for this unit, especially with the terrible transformation mechanic this unit has. 5 turns to get Super 17 out, and it takes him 10 hits to get his full defensive buff. The only good thing about this card was his 51% damage reduction, but even that drops down to only 17% after 4 turns. If he got a bunch of support a month after release, he could have had some potential usage. But no, they gave him nothing and just threw him out in the cold. At least the Tournament of Power in Androids got some great teams relatively soon after the release, but these guys got nothing and became a joke in the community. The last unit I want to talk about today is one you all expected, and that is LR Least Gohan. This card was the biggest letdown in Dokkan history. His counterpart, Orange Piccolo, completely overshadowed him in every way. We didn't get to use his beast form, which was super disappointing, and his defense was not the best considering it was conditional on the fact that he performed at least 2 additional supers. The main problem was that he only had 1 built-in additional super, so sometimes you had to pray for the second additional to be from the dupe system. Other than that, this unit was pretty solid. People just love to call him a fraud since he was supposed to be the definitive Beast Gohan card, yet all he did was dance around in his ultimate form and die to super attacks sometimes. Meanwhile, Piccolo carried the game for the next 2 years in his majestic orange form and turned the hardest events in the game into double-digit damage dealing teddy bears. Luckily, Dokkan learned their lesson and gave us the real Beast Gohan, who is still one of the best LRs in the game even as we approach the 10th anniversary. Also, let me know in the comments if I missed any hated units or if you have any specific units you hate and tell me why. Anyways, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, guys.